to any of that. Actually, there was a historic, at least in terms of this presidential cycle, a historic event last night in Madison, Wisconsin. Bernie Sanders spoke to a record crowd, and in fact, it was the largest crowd that has turned out to see a presidential candidate in the 2016 cycle to date. All right, it's not going to hold long, and I get that, but it's still significant when you think about the 25 plus candidates that are already announced for the presidency. Joining us now is somebody that was there, and we're actually going to share some of the audio that he was able to grab, is my dear friend, super activist and advocate, a guy that is always there when we all need him. Bruce Fealk joins us now from Madison. And Bruce, is always a pleasure, my friend. It sounds like last night was a huge success.
It was huge. It was huge, Tony. It was amazing. And Bernie just really hit it out of the park. It was amazing. And it was just amazing to be part of. And I was so glad I got to come to Madison and be part of it. It was awesome.
Well, let me kind of, Bruce, back up a little bit. You and I talked many, many months ago, and you were very excited about an Elizabeth Warren run for the presidency. Now, she made it fairly clear that although she was considering it, she didn't really feel that it was her time. It took a while for everybody to kind of wrap their minds around that. And in fact, you informed me just a few weeks ago that the people that were drafting Warren have now put their energy and efforts behind Bernie Sanders, which isn't surprising at all. Now, knowing how much of a Elizabeth Warren advocate you were, and I know you were disappointed when she did finally make the announcement, is Bernie Sanders her replacement, or are you excited about him in and of itself?
Well, I guess my answer to that is both. I mean, I don't think there's a nickel's worth of difference on policy between Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, so that, I feel perfectly comfortable endorsing and, probably volunteering, giving money to Bernie. I think what he is doing is a little bit different, though, because what he talked about last night, we all know these campaigns now have become multi-billion-dollar ventures. I think the latest number I heard that Hillary is budgeting for her campaign is $2.5 billion with a B. And Bernie, he's obviously not going to have that kind of money. But what I think he does have, and I think he's, the way he's planning to run his campaign is more of a movement rather than a campaign. And I think that was really evident last night, because one of the things he said is this campaign isn't about him. It's not about Hillary Clinton. It's not about any of the clowns on the Republican side. It's about the American people. And if the American people stand up and volunteer and go door to door and give him small, even small donations, so he has enough to be relevant and get his message out on television, I think he'll be successful.
All right, let's share some of the audio that you were kind enough to grab from some of the audience members. This first one is a young lady by the name of Andy. So
first, tell us your name and where you're from.
Andy Haynes. I'm from Bloomington, Indiana.
Okay, and so why are you here tonight?
I'm here to support Bernie Sanders because I think he is the best candidate for president.
Okay, and what's your feeling about between him and Hillary? Why are you supporting Bernie?
Actually, I was a Hillary supporter for a long time until I really looked at her donor list and saw that she was taking money from the big banks and Wall Street and the corporations. And I don't believe that she's going to be able to hold them accountable when she's taking money from them. And then I looked at Bernie and decided he was the candidate for me.
So are you excited to be here tonight?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, very excited.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Bruce, that was a really interesting bit of audio, because she was a Hillary supporter. She makes a good point. Listen, Hillary in the last quarter raised $45 million, not chump change. We know if we look at the donor list, I haven't done that yet, but we're going to find a lot of Wall Street folks on that list. And so this particular woman, Andy, really keyed in on that. I think is significant. And, obviously she was very excited to be where she was in Madison yesterday.
Well, I think one of the things Bernie talks about, Tony, is the fact that she's going to get a lot of her money from Wall Street, and the fact that it's going to be very, very hard, because we know that money is not given without strings, right? So how is she going to break up the banks? Because that's what Bernie talks about, is breaking up the big banks. And I think that's really important at this time in our history, because the banks, they claim they're too big to fail. They're too big to jail. And I know in Iceland, they had a similar situation to our bank failure here, but what did they do? They put their bankers in jail. And I know if we put a Jamie Dimon or a Lloyd Blankfein in jail, I bet you we wouldn't have them taking risks with their the money and doing all these crazy financial transactions that brought our economy to the brink and almost tipped us over the edge in 2008.
Well, and for those that are paying attention, about 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, Senator Bernie Sanders, not candidate, but Senator Bernie Sanders, proposed legislation that would break up the banking system in this country so that there would be no such thing as too big to fail or too big to jail. Now, we both know that's not going to go anywhere at this time, but it's important that that legislation's out there. It will get the hearings it deserves, and we'll see what happens with that. Let's play a little more audio. This one, these folks, although we're in Madison, actually come pretty close to home.
Okay, so I'm here with Pam and Bridget, and just tell us where you live.
Madison, Wisconsin.
And how about you live with your mom, obviously? Yes. Okay. And why did you come here today?
It's just exciting to see somebody else besides the mainstream candidates. He seems more of a people's candidate. I work in education, so I'm concerned about the budget. I'm concerned about the never-ending wars, and just hoping for a breath of fresh air here.
Okay. How about you, Bridget?
I'm here to listen to what Bernie has to say.
You don't look like you're a voter yet.
No.
Okay, so you're here with your mom. She brought you out, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Some great audio, really, Bruce. It was just great. I find it interesting. Yesterday on the show, we had a young man on that was talking about Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker and what he's done to higher education, cutting $250 million from higher education in the state of Wisconsin, not to mention what he's done with K-12, not to mention what he's done with right to work, et cetera. And so the people in Wisconsin and the people in Michigan actually share, unfortunately, a lot in common with regard to our Republican governors. I'm going to, and I guess I need two things. Where was this rally last night? And when we talked about the record number of folks that showed up, how many estimated were there?
Well, it was at the Alliance Center, which is a pretty big venue here in town in Madison. And I think the AP reported there were 10,000 people. I looked around the Coliseum pretty carefully, and I think I only saw maybe 15, 20 empty seats, and people were actually standing along the railings on the upper levels. So it was a huge crowd. I mean, it reminded me, I went to some of the Obama events in 2007 and 2008. And I went to an event I think it was at Troy High School. So that probably held 5,000. And this was double that. It was massive. And I think someone told me they were actually turning people away last night because they just didn't have enough places to put them.
Yeah, and I had actually read that last night, and so I would assume that is true. Bruce, as we take a look at the Republican clown car that just keeps on getting bigger and bigger, and we take a look at Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and Martin Malloy, we say to ourselves, they're really, and with all due respect to the former governor, there really are only two candidates on the Democratic side that the country's taking seriously. And we see what's happening in New Hampshire with Bernie Sanders' polling numbers. He's already up 10 points. Hillary lost those 10 points, and now they're only 10 points apart, which someone say, well, that's massive. Well, first of all, consider where we are in the campaign. I believe the first Democratic debates are about 6 weeks away. And so as we take a look at this, and you and I talked about this when Bernie announced, I don't think people should write this guy off. I think that there's a real possibility that he's going to do more than just be a spoiler, or he's going to do more than just change the conversation. I think he's going to be a serious top tier candidate. And if he doesn't make it, if he isn't nominated, Hillary Clinton's going to need his support in ways that she can't fathom right now.
Well, I think, after being there last night, when you're in a room, when you're in a venue like that, and you're with 10,000 people, and I don't know if you have any other audio that you're going to use that I sent you today, but he had some applause lines. I mean, he talked about the ban. The only subject I think he didn't touch on was immigration. Someone mentioned they didn't hear anything about immigration, but he talked about the banks. He talked about the obviously income inequality, which is probably his biggest issue. At the end, I think I sent you. I hope you use it. The audio from the end of the rally last night.
I'm going to play that before you're out of here for sure.
Okay, that was amazing because I'm 61 years old, and you're a little younger than I am. But I remember when campaigns weren't about what we couldn't do, but they were about what we can do. And I think that's what Bernie hit on last night at the end of his speech, was all the things that that we still need to do. There's a lot to do in this country. He hit on climate change. He hit on transportation, high-speed rail. I mean, all these things that we can do if we're just not caught up in this cycle of austerity that's bringing our country down. All the Republicans talk about is cutting this and cutting that. And the Democrats, instead of being progressive and having new ideas, they talk about, well, we won't cut it this much, we'll just cut it this much, instead of proposing new ideas and really solving problems. I think that's my favorite thing about Bernie, is he doesn't only talk about the problems, he talks about how he's going to solve them. And I think that's my biggest disappointment in listening to Hillary. She talks in generalities. She talks about the problems, but she isn't talking about solutions yet. So I hope when we get down to the debates and they get on the stage together, which I'm sure they will be, that Hillary starts talking about solutions rather than just the problems.
Well, and she's going to have to. There's no question about it. I think that Bernie Sanders is not necessarily a bigger threat to Hillary Clinton, and she understands what she has to do. This is a very savvy campaigner and public servant. She knows what she's doing, and strategically she'll get there. I think what Bernie Sanders does in a greater way is force Republicans to talk about issues that they would rather ignore. You mentioned immigration. I'll bet my bottom dollar, Bruce, that when he does start talking about immigration, and Bernie is really very good at not going after individuals. That's just not his style, and this isn't his strategy. It's just the way he is. And in fact, I love it that every time somebody asks him, well, what would Hillary Clinton do? And he goes, ask Hillary Clinton. I'm here to talk about me, not talk about her. But he has been very, very pointed in some of his criticism, which is forcing Republican candidates to have to address issues they would rather not touch at all. And I think that's the brilliance of this campaign.
Well, he's been really, really successful at framing the issue. The other thing I think he does really well is he frames the issues in moral terms. That it's immoral to have people go hungry, have children go hungry in this country. It's immoral for children to go without education. It's immoral for good students that can make a difference in our country if they just get a chance to go to college. It's immoral that they can't go to college because they can't afford it. And that's another big applause line that he has is that he wants to provide a free college tuition for everyone that's able to go, that's qualified to go. And I think that that's a huge investment. But I think almost every industrialized country in the world has a program like that. I think you can go to Germany as an American student and not have to pay tuition. I mean, Germany will take our smart kids. That's backwards. And I think Bernie has a lot of the right ideas as far as moving our country forward in a really positive way. And hopefully if he were to be elected, that we can get him somehow find a way to get a Democratic Congress, a progressive Democratic Congress, and some more progressives in the Senate, so we won't have to deal with like we did last time when we had the majority in the Senate. We had 60 votes, but 4 or 5 of them were kind of blue dog Democrats that typically wouldn't vote on a progressive agenda.
Let's listen to Bernie Sanders' closing remarks. Again, Bruce Fealk is my guest. He recorded all of this very graciously. I know you also shared it with the good folks from Workers Independent News as well. But let's listen to Bernie Sanders' closing remarks, and then we'll talk.
In Washington, the debate is often about whether we cut education by 2% or 6%, whether we throw this many people off of health care or that many, whether we give corporations this much of a tax break or that much of a tax break. That's not the worldview that we should have. Our vision should be that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. We can provide health care to every man, woman, and child as a right. We can make certain that every person in this country can get all of the education he or she needs, regardless of the income. We can create millions of decent paying jobs. We can have the best child care system in the world. In the last 30 years, there has been a huge redistribution of wealth from the middle class and working families to the top 0.1%. Our job is to reverse that, redistribute wealth back into the hands of working families. Now, in terms of this campaign, I am more than aware that my opponents will be able to outspend us. They have billionaire backers, they have super PACs, they have a lot of billionaire friends. But we are going to win this election. We are going to win this election because if we do our job well, if we develop the grassroots national movement that I know we can, at the end of the day, they may have the money, but we have the people, and when the people come together.
Now, I had to cut that off a little bit because the woman that was standing next to you, Bruce, got very loud, which isn't a bad thing. And in fact, I edited out some of the applause just because it went on a long time. And not that that's a problem, but yeah, I just wanted people to know that I did edit that a little bit because the applause, especially when he talked about, when he first said, we are going to win this. And they, of course, the crowd went crazy and he didn't even finish his line yet. So the energy, let's talk about the energy, the synergy that was in that arena last night. And you had also spoken to some people from Lansing. That's the other thing, is that there were people from all over the surrounding states that came to Madison yesterday, which is extraordinary in and of itself.
No, there were lots of people that came from out of state. I mean, in fact, I was with a friend, Nancy. She drove in from the Quad Cities. She drove about 2.5 hours. There was the two young people from East Lansing that I interviewed. There were a lot of young people in that room too. That was something else. It wasn't a real diverse crowd. Of course, Madison's not a real diverse city, at least downtown here. But there was a lot of young people in that. There were a lot of young people in that room, and that was really exciting to see that the young people are coming out and supporting Bernie. And those are the people that are going to hopefully put their walking shoes on and go knock doors for Bernie when the campaign gets a little bit further into the cycle.
Well, Bruce, the reality is a Democrat can't win the White House without the vote of the millennials and women. I mean, that is critically important, or it doesn't happen. And certainly Barack Obama proved that, no question. Listen, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know where this is headed. But as I said, day one of the Bernie Sanders announcement that he was going to run, that nobody should take this man lightly. They should understand. And, we talked on the show. In fact, my guest in the 10 o'clock hour, Richard Zombeck, who is a brilliant, has a brilliant political mind, has said on the show that, people don't understand the significance of Bernie Sanders running as a Democrat. He didn't do that because it was easier. That's not why he did it. He did it because it was the right thing to do. I mean, Bernie Sanders is not stupid. He is very calculated in the best possible way. And Bruce, the other challenge that we've got going on here, and Workers Independent News has been focusing on this the last couple of weeks. Labor has some huge decisions to make with regards to endorsements because Bernie is 100% with labor. I mean, if you could, and I don't believe in the exaggeration, 110%, because there is no such thing. Hillary Clinton is, I'm sure, 99.3% with labor. It's not like they lose either way, but Bernie Sanders has never, ever, ever done anything but not only support labor, but certainly to go out on their behalf. He shows up at strikes. I mean, this is a guy that lives that motto that he is a public servant, that what built this country in the middle class were labor unions, and he will do everything he can to protect them. Nobody is going to have that kind of passion. I don't know where labor is going to come down on this, but some of the locals are already endorsing him, creating some challenges for the nationals.
Well, I think that's one of the big differences between Bernie and Hillary is that, Hillary would not come down in a clear answer and say yes or no to the TPP. Bernie's come down very clearly, and he's been consistent on all these free trade deals, is he is squarely against them, and he has been very, very clear. That's another thing I like about Bernie is when you ask him a question, you get a yes or a no, and he tells you why he's going to vote yes or no, or why he supports an issue. And that's actually unique, I think, with a lot of politicians. Hillary's just been so calculating in all of her answers. She just would not give labor a straight answer. And I think a lot of labor is already lining up behind Bernie because of the TPP, if nothing else.
Well, like I said, the locals, there are quite a few locals that have already endorsed Bernie Sanders. And locals are free to do that. Now, the national can obviously and may obviously go in another direction, but I think it is an interesting study, and I'm going to be very, very curious to see how this plays out. Richard Trumka, who is the president of the National AFL-CIO, has said that they may not endorse in this in the presidentials in 2016. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Very, very interesting. We only have literally 60 seconds left, Bruce. Leave us with your impressions. I mean, obviously it was an exciting night, but you walk away from this feeling what?
Well, certainly feeling that Bernie Sanders is a serious candidate. He's going to pose a serious challenge to Hillary Clinton, and that people ought to really start paying attention to Bernie because just by the enthusiasm in that room, I couldn't tell that this is going to be a much more interesting race between Hillary and Bernie than probably any of the people in Washington, D.C. or the political pundits that you see or hear on the radio or on television are predicting right now. Bernie is a serious, serious candidate, and people